Right, so the Austin Healey's rebuild is well underway now. The engine and gearbox are in, but one job that we do want to do is we want to fit wire wheels. Now that involves fitting a splined hub onto which the wire wheel slides. Now we can buy just an extension that comes out here and put the wire wheels on, but what that would do would be to bring out the track of that wire wheel. So instead of the wheel sitting around here, it would sit out here somewhere, and that is not good for the steering geometry. And also it would interfere with the wheel going into the wheel arch. So what we have to do is basically scrap this bit, get the new hub, put it on, attach the disc onto it, and then the wire wheel can slide on and it will be in the correct place. It'll be correctly oriented. So what I have to do is take off this caliper, remove the hub, and then we should be able to fit the bearings to the new hub, slide it on, obviously with the disc attached to it as well, and then the wheel will simply slot on there. That's the theory anyway. Now wire wheels were fitted because they allowed more cooling air to get through to the brakes, hence sports cars having wire wheels. It's an easy way of getting airflow to brakes that are going to be working harder on a faster car. Wrong way, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Right, there's our caliper removed. There's our hub nut off, bearings out, shims, hub and spacer. So this is our stub axle here, and this is where the new splined hub will actually sit. So what I need to do is get the new piece, offer it up and see if there are any complications in fitting that actual splined hub. Hopefully it should be a straightforward job, but now that I've said that, of course it won't be. Here's our new inner hub bearing, and there's the track, there's the bearing, it sits in there and runs smoothly in the track. So what we have to do is fit the track into the hub first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build these up dry to begin with, and the reason I'm going to build them up dry is because I want to build it all up and get the end float in the bearings first before I fit any grease into the bearings, because if I fit the grease in, then I'll get a false reading on the end float on the bearing. Now the end float is the amount of play that we have in the lateral movement of the hub, because if we tighten these bearings in too tightly, what will happen is they'll bind in there and they'll wear out really quickly. So there has to be just a tiny little bit of play so that they roll nice and smoothly. So I'll fit the track first, and I'll build up the hubs, put them onto the stub axle, then we'll check out the end float, get the correct amount of end float, be a couple of thousandths of an inch, then we can then grease the bearings up and know that when we tighten the hub nut up that we've got the correct amount of play in there so that the bearings won't bind and they won't wear out really quickly. So there's our inner track in, and then the bearing fits in there like so, and so the hub can spin nice and freely on there. Now we have a spacer and some shims that fit in between the two bearings, and that acts as a distance piece between the bearings, and it's by addition or removal of these shims that we actually get the bearing set correctly so that we get the correct amount of end float. So I'm going to put the inner track in. This might be a little bit more tricky. So both our tracks are now in place. There's the inner one, and down inside there is the outer one. Just try our inner bearing on there. Hopefully it should slide on nicely. Yep, there's all the way to the back. There is a hub seal that has to go into the back of here, but while we're doing our dry fit, we won't be fitting the seal yet. Spacer on that way first. Now shims are little distance pieces of a precise thickness. So I'll find the thickest ones first and put those on. What I'll do is I'll build this up with all the shims, then I can see exactly how much end float there is. And then once I've checked the end float, hopefully there'll be too much. Once I've checked it, then I can remove the shims as necessary, and then we'll have the setting correct. Get our outer bearing in. There we go. So our hub's now spinning on 2 bearings. Then get our hub nut washer. That fits on there. Then finally, the hub nut itself. It's a castellated nut with little slots in it, because once it's tightened, we have to use a split pin to lock this in place. It's very important that the split pin is used, because otherwise this nut can come loose and the whole hub can come off. So if I tighten the nut up, there you go, just pinch it. Now, I can't really feel anything by hand, so what I'm going to have to do is get a dial test indicator to see how much end float, how much lateral movement there is in this hub. So I'm on 0 now, and I'm going to pull on the hub and see what reading we have. 0.004 of an inch. Now, I don't think we've got quite enough there, so I'm going to try and see if I can find another shim to put in, and then we'll see if we can get too much play, and then we can start subtracting shims. That's the most important thing. What I'm going to do is put another shim on, hub back in. We've got just enough play in those bearings to allow for heat expansion so that they'll spin nice and freely. So there we have our hub bearings set, and they spin nicely, so there's no conflict, they're not tight. So that is our hub bearing end float set. So now what I need to do is remove the hub, grease the bearings up, put the seals in, put the disc on, put it all back together, and then all we need to do is wait for those wire wheels to turn up. Hurry up, Timmy!